We continue the conversation as we look back into 1 year of COVID-19 in the country. Remember, Friday the 13th, 2020 was the day the CS Mutahi Kagwe came to the steps of Harambe House, right?
Coffee
On
House.
that day.
Oh, on that day was Harambe House.
That day was Harambe House.
Yes, it was.
And made the announcement that Kenya has recorded the first case of COVID-19. Said it was a Kenyan who had traveled from the US via London and arrived and spent some time and then developed some symptoms, went and got tested, and the test came out positive. And since that day, we have been dealing with COVID-19 in the country. We are at a point where we have over 111,000 cases confirmed in the country, 1,889 deaths so far. Many people have known somebody or people who have been affected by COVID-19. Many people have tested positive and recovered from COVID-19. Many, 1,889, have tested positive and not recovered from COVID-19. We have one of the people who've recovered from COVID-19 joining us in the studio just to come and tell us the story of how he went through that whole experience. And this is Ian Dennis. He's a host of the Business Coach on KTN Home. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
I'm still laughing in my mind about the proverb.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
Yes.
It's a proverb. It's a Kenyan proverb. And
It is.
You can directly relate to it, right?
Yes, directly. But I don't remember going through it in school.
There are very many proverbs. If you actually went to school to just study proverbs, you could do the entire
An entire
844
course. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
just doing proverbs. So Ian,
Yes.
it's 1 year since the first case of COVID was recorded in the country.
Yeah.
You're one of those in the statistics of
Yes.
111,000 positive cases in Kenya,
Yes.
and also one of those in the statistics of over 100,000 who have recovered
Yes.
from COVID in the country.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us your experience. When did you contract COVID, and did you get symptomatic or asymptomatic?
So mine was a very interesting case. I remember it was in July. And I remember that time everybody was a bit cautious in terms of interacting with people. So just ensuring that because of the government directives, keeping social distance and just having interactions with people, their travels and all that stuff. So just keeping close to my friends. But I remember at that particular point, it started off the lockdown being at home. So I remember one particular weekend, I think to just staying in the house was just too tiring because we started working from home. So most of the week you're home and then just making that precaution. So we decided to go to Karura just to go have, just ride and just have a walk. And I remember after that particular experience, I'm not sure if I got it there. I remember just hanging with my friends. The following week now, I just started experiencing some symptoms whereby I had chest pains. I was very tired. I will start my day up, but I will sleep most of the day. I was just extremely tired. And most of the time I will experience chest pains and my body was just completely tired. So it went on for a couple of days until I told my friends about it until they insisted, hey, just go to the hospital. And because I had some historical medical case of me having pneumonia, so I presume maybe it might be that. So I went to the hospital, and true to it, I did a couple of tests, and then the test came out that I had pneumonia. But the doctor was very cautious. He's like, oh yes, this is pneumonia, but it has the same symptoms as COVID. So he advised that the hospital at that point couldn't test, so they told me go get a test. And since it to that point whereby things are still very new, I'd not known anybody. Remember that point? Do you know someone else in corona? No. Do you know someone? I was like, no. So the following day I decided, I told the office because I thought it was prudent to actually do that. And then I went to to do the test, and then the test came out positive, and it was quite shocking. Because I remember the senior HR called me. I was like, okay, this is an interesting call. So I was like, in my mind, I was like, I'm negative. And then it just struck me. I'm like, yeah, you're positive. And you had pneumonia here. So at that particular point now I decided after I got that particular news, so I had to go back to the hospital and find out what exactly it was, what do I need to do?
Sure.
Because I had no idea what exactly I needed to do at that particular point. And at that when I went out to the hospital back, because I remember my temperature was just normal, because the previous day I'd checked up already in the hospital, my temperature was normal. The only symptoms I had were just the tiredness, my chest was just clogging up, and just a lot of just feeling always down. So when I went back to the hospital, I think also the hospital had not experienced that. And I remember walking, because I'd not told anyone. I had my mask. I knew I was positive. No one knew. So when you go to the hospital, they do the normal checks, and then I requested to see the doctor. So when I saw the doctor, I was like, yeah, I broke the news to her. I think she was.
She was in shock.
She was. I think she was in shock because I think, and the hospital is still trying to get how they're supposed to deal with it.
Yeah.
So something weirdly happened. So let me go pick some papers. There's some protocol the team was setting up. I was in the office alone for around 40 minutes until I got so pissed because I felt I was being discriminated against. I actually had to walk out of the hospital because and I felt, I think the doctor was scared because they had not dealt with that. And I think you're just using that particular illusion of, I'm going to get some documents and find out what protocols need to be done. So I just walked out of the hospital. So at that point, I just drove back home and I started calling a couple of friends. What did I need to do?
Okay, hold on. So, Ian, you took a test.
Yes.
Where did you go to have this test done?
I did it at Lancet.
Okay.
At that point, yes.
All right. So, I mean, at this time, sure, you're right, because by the time we were in July, it was about 3 months after
Yes.
the first case. So
Yes.
things were still kind of up in the air.
Yes.
We were going through that whole quarantine debacle, who is
And
being
stigma
quarantined,
was at its
where
peak.
stigma was at its peak.
Just
Yep.
crazy.
There was nothing like this. This home-based care was a story.
Yes.
It was not, we didn't even know the centers where people could go get tested
Yes.
yet, right?
Yes.
At that time, however,
Yeah.
quarantine was mandatory.
Yes.
And then after you were found positive, isolation then was mandatory.
Yes.
So did you, after you found out you were positive, having gone to the hospital and you really didn't know, what to do.
Yeah.
What did you do when you went to the hospital that day and these folks disappeared? You left the hospital. Did
Yeah.
anybody call
Try
you
and
back
grab
From
you
the
back.
hospital.
Try and
Nothing.
say,
No one noticed you leaving.
Nobody noticed you leaving.
No, actually, I had
even
to
the doctor that you had told that you were positive,
So
did not maybe make a phone call.
So it was very interesting. I was in the hospital. He left me in that room for almost 40 minutes. And then so I was like, okay, so what's up? So I had to leave and then I had to go back to the receptionist. They didn't know I'm positive because I had my mask, just making my own particular precaution. And I didn't want to tell them that this actually had happened because at that point there was a lot of stigma. So what I did, because when you go to the hospital, you pay a consultancy fee. So the first thing I went was like, hey, I came to be seen by a doctor and the doctor just left me there. So are you guys going to refund me?
I mean, of
I
course,
go home.
valid question, yes.
Yeah, it is a valid question. And then they asked me, had you gone to the doctor's office? Yes, I went, but he hasn't attended to me. And then you can't be refunded. I was so pissed off at that particular point. So I decided just got into the car and went home. They never called me. They never did anything to it. I just don't want to mention the hospital. But it was just, I was very pissed off because at that particular point, there's a lot of stigma to it.
So what did you do? You went home,
So,
camped out at home for another 2 weeks. What did you do?
So I went back home at that particular point. But on my way, before I leave in the hospital, I told a couple of close friends that I was positive, guys I will trust. And then they gave me advice. At that point, they told me that you need, because I have a friend of mine who just, consumed a lot of information around what you need to do around this. So he advised me, go to the chemist, pick some vitamin C's and get some, cod liver oil, the tablets, just to help boost your immunity. And just get lots of fruits and just ensure that you eat well. So that's what I did. I went to the pharmacy. Interestingly, I went to the pharmacy and they spoke to the lady who was there and they just mentioned to him in confidence. Some people you can see you just trust. I told them, hey, yeah, I've gone to the hospital, I have COVID, they've not attended to me. So what do I need to do? And a friend of mine told me I need to get all these things. And he told me actually it does work. Even I think I got the last one at that particular chemist. So he gave me that.
Ian, I'm sorry, but I have to stick on this point.
Yes.
You went to a hospital. You told the doctors that you were positive.
Yes.
You were not attended to.
Yes.
You left. And so any kind of medical care that you got was advice that you got from your friends.
Yes.
You went to a pharmacy to get medicine and then you went back home.
Yes.
In my mind, I'm wondering how many more people who then maybe didn't have the advice of friends or anything.
No, it's a lot.
Would have gone through this.
And I remember at that point, there was a lot of confusion around it. And the stigma was just too crazy. The stigma was just too crazy. You can just see guys even just talk about it like it's just too crazy. Even just telling the chemist, at least I think she had dealt, because the way she just attended to me, she was like, she sounded like someone who had dealt with a lot of people in the same situation. Because at that point, hospitals are not had that particular structure in terms of how exactly they're dealing with it. I think testing, most of the hospitals were not doing it, so you had to be sent to either Lancet or I think 1-2 hospitals are doing it. So there was a lot of just confusion. So at that point, you're just relying on information that you've actually had and no one really attended to you. So I remember I did that and then I went back home. I told at least a close friends of mine and I'm still staying alone. So at least I was in quarantine for a couple of days until the situation got a bit worse. Yeah.
It got worse and then what happened?
So I started feeling, what's it called, like breathing problems.
This was after you'd gone to the pharmacy and gotten
Yes,
this medication.
yes.
Okay.
So I started getting the vitamins. Friends of mine did a couple of shopping. Just they brought it home to me. But something interesting was like a couple of days after I started having breathing problems. Like I used to find I was afraid of sleeping. Like I'll ensure that either I'll sleep but at night I was just afraid of sleeping. So I'll stay up until late. And I felt one thing, maybe just looking back in retrospect, there's also a lot of, there's more mental. Because at that point you used to hear, when you're young, they say it is for the old people. But I remember one night I was like, because you just check the news, just check out how everything that's going on. Oh, this young guy has died, this young kid has died. So, and I was having, the symptoms were there, but I felt it was more mental. Because it was the stigma around it, you couldn't tell a lot of people, you couldn't announce it. So I started having a lot of breathing problems. I had it for like 2 nights. So the third one I was like, hey, let me just call insurance and see what exactly they can do. Because I remember that particular point, it was either mandatory isolation and you also to go to the hospital. And most of the time, the ICUs, most of the hospitals were actually just fully checked, as in you couldn't fully booked. So luckily enough, we called insurance and that to make several calls through the morning to look for space. So they got space for me at Avenue Hospital. And then because of what exactly I was feeling at that particular point, and no one can come and check and tell you that probably it was not, your condition was not as bad as compared to other people.
Yeah.
So they sent an ambulance to come pick me up. And that was just the most storied time. Oh my goodness. I've never been in an ambulance. I've never accompanied someone in an ambulance. So you can try to imagine you calling they had sent the ambulance to come and pick me because you can't drive yourself. They was like, no, you can't drive yourself.
Right.
Yeah. So they had to send the ambulance and then the whole team just I'd given the directions as they walked into the estate and then they'd come all armored with the PPEs. And then it was like, it felt like a military process because they're all armored. They didn't even touch me. It was like, oh, just showed the direction into they closed it for me. I was just alone in the back. And then, that process, with the ambulance going through traffic and all that stuff. So in my mind,
Did you see the neighbors peeping?
luckily enough, it was around 11, 12. So most of the guys were not there. But the
And the
what's called the
ambulance did not
watchman
have
was
the
there.
siren on. And when it came.
At that when it came, it didn't have the siren. It got the siren when we started moving. But I'd seen the stairs from the watchman and all that stuff because it's like, hey, guys were all armored. The ambulance was there. It just- and then and the interesting thing they'd already called the hospital. So getting to the hospital, military process. The reception, like no one touched me. Everybody has a PPE direction. The lift was already open. Someone was picking me up, directed until I got to my bed. As in, so
Well, all right then. So then you got to your bed, and what happened after that? So now you were strapped up to a machine. What happens?
All right,
And for how
so-
long were you in hospital?
when I got to the hospital, I stayed in bed because the morning rounds they're already done. So in the afternoon labs by the doctor who came, was just going all around, just came, checked me, and he considered my situation was mild.
Okay.
That's what exactly she told me. But she did a couple of tests in terms of just checking out how exactly my breathing is. But one of the precaution and gave me a couple of medication. But one of the interesting thing that he did was, or rather one thing that I noticed through that particular process, I remember at night, most of the time guys who were dying because of COVID was because they had a lot of clogging in their lungs. So what she advised was like, because she told me I'm young, I was like, I used to exercise and all that stuff. So I remember that particular night I got an injection. So there's an injection once you have COVID and just prevent you having clogs within your lungs. So they inject you next to your tummy. So to ensure that doesn't happen.
Okay.
And considering your situation and the situations of guys I saw at the hospital, they told me that I can get some medication. And if I want, I stayed in the hospital for a night, but they told me that if I feel that I'm a bit up because they saw they don't have any particular clogs. They told me they can actually discharge me, or I can remain in hospital just so that they can get to monitor me, but I can continue my isolation at home. But when I told, there's a friend of mine who I met there is an Indian fellow who had been in the hospital for a week, and he advised me that his condition was worse. And what he told me was that if my lungs are okay and I sort of can breathe better, I just get to discharge myself because the bill was just another thing. Yes, the insurance was paying. But I'd looked at it just for the night I spent in hospital. One injection, because there's no sort of like medication to it.
Yeah.
They just also gave me the vitamin C's and just checked me. There's now special medication that they give to you. For one, my bill was around 70,000 for one afternoon
70,
and night.
70.
For 24 hours.
Yes.
Was it about 24 to 30 hours
Yes.
maximum?
Yes. With one injection and just a
But
couple
we're counting
of
now
pills.
the PPEs from the ambulance people, the people who have...
The ambulance
attended
was
to
not
you.
there. Ambulance was separate.
It's a separate bill.
Yes. So the bill was just, as in, I wish I'd come up with it. It was just, I'll send you guys the bill. I was so shocked. The PPEs, I think, just being attended. But we're trying to look at it. There's nothing special there's no special attention to it, unless maybe you have breathing problems just on oxygen. But there's no set medication to it, just being monitored. And after my experience, I got to realize that particular experience was more mental than it is physical. And I
Sure.
think because at that particular point, there's a lot of stigma into it, and there's not a lot of awareness as how exactly to deal with it. Because what I got to realize from that particular experience, the most important thing when you have it, even I advise my friends, like, don't have it so much in your mind. Because just a normal occurrence. But the interesting thing is that if you have a pre-existing condition, it can also be bad.
Sure.
Because when I was in hospital, I saw like 2 or 3 guys go, but they were a bit elderly. And I also saw a few young people also just struggle because maybe of pre-existing conditions. And it's just a scary thing though, because I consider if you're in that particular situation and you don't have, what's it called? If you can be checked out and don't have any particular clogging in the lungs, please don't go to hospital. Because I think it also just did a psychological effect.
On you.
Yeah, because you're in a ward and the people next to you are struggling.
Yeah.
And worse off also because in that particular hospital, there's a high dependency. We are in the high dependency unit, but also the guys in special wards because of special cases. And you can see because it's glass and you can see someone just all strapped out in terms of all the oxygen and being helped in terms of breathing.
Yeah.
I think that caused even much more damage than where exactly I was.
But what did you say that it also helped you to realize that what you are feeling, and when the doctor tells you yours is mild, you could actually also relate
Yes.
because you've seen somebody who's worse off.
Yeah.
And therefore, when they're telling you, you can just go back home,
Yeah.
go and continue with self-isolation at home, take care of yourself at home. You'd go back home feeling, okay,
Yes.
I am among the few lucky ones
Yes.
who have tested positive, but my condition has not got into that. It could also be the positive side of actually witnessing
Yes. It was.
the effect of COVID on other people.
Yes. I think even it triggered so many things about my outlook in life after that experience. Because when you're there, in life, I've just come to realize when you're well, you don't see, as in the things in Akusumbua, just the small things.
Yep.
But after that particular experience, you get to realize that some people are just in a bad situation. And something interesting also just happened because we were supposed to. So after the hospital, I came back home. I was in self-isolation. My friends were helping me in terms of just doing the shopping and dropping it in my house. Because also at that particular point, friends also have a lot of stigma. They're just there because they're very close. And then something interesting happened about my situation. Because after that, you told you have 14 days. And then after that, you need to go do a retest.
Yeah.
And that point, it was mandatory so that you can you show you're negative.
Yeah.
So after the 14 days, I actually stayed until 21 days. I went again to be tested. I was still positive.
21 days later.
21 days later.
Wow.
Wow. So at that particular point now, government called.
Okay. So by then, because if you're looking at July and you're
Yes.
looking about a month later,
Yes.
truth be told, it was around this August time
Yes.
now that the Ministry of Health had actually started saying, we're going to start calling people, especially
Yes.
now when they get this.
Yes.
So, I mean, around that time is when they started doing this. And then around then is also when we saw the suggestions for things like home-based care for
Yes.
cases that were not so serious.
Yes.
So when you did get the call from Ministry of Health, or
Yeah.
rather from
Yeah.
the government, what was it that they said to you or asked you?
No, they're just breaking the news to me.
That you got your
Yes, because at that point, that changed the protocol. You see, the first time I got tested, it was like, because the company, the one who catered for that particular expense, so they relayed the news, guys from Lancet relayed the news to the head of HR, and then HR called me. So the second time when I went to get tested, I think now the protocol was that you have to relate to the government, and government has to keep track. So someone from the ministry called me and told me, I'm positive again. So I need to again stay, what's it called, under quarantine for another 14 days and then to be tested, which I did. And at this particular point, I was like, it doesn't make sense because the testing is just too expensive. So the ministry were like, if at least for that particular case where you have tested positive for the second time, they're going to cater for it. So I just go to a government clinic and be tested again. And I was tested again. And I was positive.
Third time.
Oh.
Yes. I just, at that particular point, I was getting pissed off. I was
So,
like, what exactly was the problem?
Second test was after 21 days.
Yes.
Third test is after another 21 days.
Yes.
So 42 days later, you are still positive.
Yes.
Okay.
So which was
But at this point, on the 42nd day,
Yes.
are the symptoms as bad as you had them on the first day?
no, things had gone down because I think I had both COVID and pneumonia. So I was
Alright.
taking most of the medication for pneumonia, and also at the same time I was taking the vitamins and the aloe vera and some of the ensuring that just I'm on a very good diet, the vitamin C and all that stuff. So my symptoms had gone down. I just experienced just a bit of tiredness, and
So the fatigue is still there.
the fatigue is still there, but just slightly. It's
Initially, you
not as
had a
it
bit
was.
of a chest congestion.
Yes, that was now
That had cleared.
that had cleared out.
And you never at any point had high fever.
No.
Never at any point had joint aches.
No. So I think I got to realize also the symptoms do vary from person to
Yes.
person.
Yeah, clearly.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's no. It was so much, how are you going to feel? I'm feeling like this. Is it COVID? I'm like, it varies from person to person,
Okay.
and then depending on the existing condition that you're in. So I think after I got tested for the third time, it was still positive. The minister told me that I still wait for another days, and then still got to be tested. So like now the fourth time, I was like, I don't want to be tested again. I thought maybe I'm going to live with COVID forever
All right.
because it was scary. So the third time, I had been told that I think at that particular point now, they'd done a couple of research, and they're saying that for some cases you can be asymptomatic for quite a long period of time and may not clear as fast as it is, but the COVID has cleared. Because after, I remember having a conversation with one of the doctors who's part of one of the clinics, and he was telling me from some of the research, once you've tested positive, after 14 days you don't need to be tested again, because I think after the research it had shown that it's already cleared out, but you may remain asymptomatic. So what at that particular point they were doing was that after 14 days and you had been tested before, they're just writing for you a note that you're actually clear, because so that in case of anywhere that you need to go about it. But I remember she did that to me because that was after my third test. But I decided because friends had pushed me, I'm like, Ian, just get a positive test or just get somewhere else to go tested. But I was like, I'd already tested in a private institution, and government had tested me once, private twice, now government had tested me once. Let me try the second time again. I was like, why not? I did it again, positive. And I was like, no, I got the letter. So I was told I was positive, but I just had to go tell them, I just had to get the letter because I realized maybe my condition was more symptomatic, and maybe it just may stay with you a bit much more longer as compared to somebody else before clearing it.
And
so,
also maybe the other effect of the pneumonia as well.
Yes.
Could have had something. So Ian, we thank you very much for sharing your story with us. Since then, up to now, I'm sure you've heard, some people who've tested positive.
Yes.
Some who have had mild and other serious conditions,
Yeah.
probably. What would you tell our audience this morning, those who are watching us, those who are listening to us, and maybe they're still wondering, what's this whole COVID story?
I know guys are usually comparing COVID to a flu. Which is just a virus that goes through you. But I think what I'll just tell any person who gets it, first of all, any person within any environment, you can get any person, no one chooses to have it.
Sure.
So stigma just could be put down. Any person who has it should not be discriminated against, but need to take caution, because I've seen this thing can actually kill people. But if you have it, the first advice I tell someone, just go to the hospital just to be tested just have your lungs be checked out, because I was being informed that was actually what kills people. And just take the self-isolation for the period you are in. Take your vitamins. They did help. And the cod liver oil tablets, they did really help in terms of boosting your immunity. And for any person just listening to this, before even you get it, ensure that you just exercise and ensure that your vitals are just working quite well. But that's the only advice. And if you have it, or if you have a pre-existing condition, please take necessary precaution, diabetes, all that stuff. Take extreme precaution, because when it hits you, it really hits hard. And I've seen a couple of people.
Indeed.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
Thanks a
Ian.
lot,
Ian
Ian.
Dennis is the host of The Business Coach on KTN Home. It comes on which days?
It comes on every Monday, 7:30 p.m. Yes.
On KTN Home.
Yes.
Asante sana, Dennis.
Thank you so much.
And
Thanks,
thank you
Dennis.
for
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life.